It is lovely to be here with you. I was grateful not to have to fly here, but I could drive here, and just really honored to be a part of this day with you. I know we're going to be getting slides up in a moment, but just wanted to I want to share a little bit my caregiver story. Or you could imagine if I had wedding pictures up, sometimes I would show that, say I paid enough for these wedding photos, let's have them here. But my mom was one of 7 children. She was the decision maker for the care for her parents. And it was amazing to see how all of them could get on the same page. And many of you may be coming from large families. I've got in-laws who are aging, having some memory issues, a family kind of coming together, step siblings getting coordinated. My dad's family, my dad's side of the world, 3rd marriage, I've got half siblings, step siblings, whole siblings, kind of figuring out the dynamics of who's on first in these conversations is important. So I'm here with that kind of background as well. I just want to be sure we can get slides. It was up a moment ago. But I'm going to share with you a little bit, I'll go off of memory here, about the Conversation Project. As mentioned earlier, we're an initiative trying to help people have conversations about the care they want through the end of life. We don't have a preference for the type of care somebody has. We want to be sure that whatever somebody's wishes are, those are talked about. We joke that this should be the Conversations Project and not just the Conversation Project. This happens more than once. And that for us, we believe that talking about this is really important. I'm not trying to dismiss the value of the written word and legal documents and medical documents, but for us, we've learned that it doesn't do much good if somebody has a document sitting in a filing folder that nobody ever knew about, or in a safety deposit box, or talking to my mother-in-law about this, and she said, oh yes, I had shoulder surgery 13 years ago. I'm sure the doctor still has my wishes on file. And I'm thinking, I am sure your doctor doesn't still have those on file, and I think your wishes may have changed over time, and I want to be sure we can talk about that. So bear with me as we keep going. Should we just keep going with this mode here for the slides? Okay. I just need to be able to control the mouse instead of you then. All right, a little bit tiny, but hopefully this works for people. So we were just talking about how we can't talk about every hypothetical thing that we may want for our care, but we can talk a lot about our values. And so I'm going to just share a little bit more with you about that. So for us, we're really trying to shift away from an emphasis on death and dying. This is more, how does somebody want to live their life through the end? I think that framing can be really helpful as we're engaging other people. It's a shift from what's the matter with you to what matters most to you. And from understanding what matters most to somebody, we can make some medical decisions and choices. It's not just about what the clinical model is. Again, it's about our values. And rather than just telling somebody what we think they should be doing, it's really trying to listen to what somebody's trying to tell us or what they find to be most important. Oh, this is going to be a wonky. And I think that this idea of listening is really important. We know, I love this quote that says, it's often through the quality of our listening and not the wisdom of our words that we're able to affect the most profound changes in the people around us. When we listen, we offer with our attention an opportunity for wholeness. And that's one of the things I really want to hit home here. So theconversationproject.org is a website. Everything we offer is free. So I just want to start that from the beginning. If you're poking around on the website, everything is free. It's available in multiple languages. And when we first got started, we said we want to have resources for people so that if they want to have these conversations, we want them to realize you don't have to wait for a doctor or a lawyer to bring them up. These are conversations you can have yourself, and to have a place where you can get them. We have lots of stories that people have shared, blog posts people have written, everything from kind of like thoughtful in the bottom right-hand corner, this idea of somebody talking about Father's Day and the reason he's had these conversations with his children is his role as a father and how he wants to continue to help them, all the way to the slightly more irreverent of somebody writing, dear loved ones, please trim my chin and upper lip hairs if I'm ever in a situation where I can't be doing that. Here's what I really need you to know about what matters most to me. So we've got lots of stories that people have shared. And then these free conversation guides. So these are tools to try to help people, and I'll walk you you through a little bit of what we found in them or created in them. How people say, okay, I know I should have this conversation, but I don't know what to talk about. And so we've created free guides in multiple languages to help you do that. We have free guides for how to choose a healthcare proxy or that surrogate decision maker, the person who would make decisions if you couldn't make it for yourself. How do you choose somebody? How do you be that proxy or that healthcare agent for somebody else? What if you're a caregiver of somebody with Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia, or for a seriously ill child? We have guides for each of those scenarios. We also have one that is a serious illness guide. You may have somebody in your life who could not handle seeing a document or hearing questions that ever mention the end of life, but there's a guide for anybody living with a serious illness to still ask some of these questions and never bring up death or end of life. And so we have a tool like that that can be really helpful. And then we've also recently worked with our parent organization that's doing a lot of work on age-friendly health systems to create a guide for older adults that's more broadly about care, not at all about end of life, but how do we think about what matters to us, mobility, our medications, and our mind. How are we doing? How are we feeling? What's happening? Maybe dementia, delirium, depression, loneliness. So thinking about some of those topics. So all of these are available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Chinese at the moment. For any of the people who are working here or the vendors here, they have a Creative Commons license on them, so you can adapt them, you can put your own logos on them, you can help get them out to people, because our goal is to just share this. All of our work is philanthropically supported from foundations and donations, so we're just trying to get resources out to people. And after we created the website, started to create some of these tools, all of which we got feedback from individuals. The very first tool looks very different than what we've ended up with now. We started to hear from people in communities like this. Can I bring this to where I live, work, pray, learn? Nancy Nurse, the retired ICU nurse who says, I want to bring this to Boulder, Colorado, to my community because I've seen how important this is. So you can see a little map of the United States with arrows where people were joining us on a call. People all over the US are working on this, and it's been neat to see events such as this, or employers who are realizing that many of their employees are caregivers when they go home, and a way to help them is to help introduce these topics. Tons of congregations of all different denominations introducing this topic. We know for many people that's a more trusted member of the community to hear from and to understand with kind of a denominational lens, what does my faith say I can or can't do, or can we look at a reading and talk about this together? So it's been really neat to see the different ministries and groups that have come together there as well. And so I want to share with you a little bit about what is in these guides. So when you first look through them, one of the first questions is open-ended. What matters most to me through the end of my life is, and we ask people to fill in the blanks. If we had 3 hours together here, I would have guides for you to sit and do it and turn and talk to your neighbor, but you can start to imagine what maybe one of your answers might be. And we see everything from, I want to be in the hospital with excellent nursing care. I want to peaceful, pain-free, nothing left unsaid. One woman shared, I really hate having the sheets tucked in around my feet. And if I can't speak for myself and you think you're making me cozy by tucking in those sheets around my toes, please know that that is not what I want. So people have all different types of answers of what matters most to them or what they would want somebody to know about. But you can see here some of the words, the most common things that come up. I see peaceful, with family and friends, comfortable, painless, happy, laughter, natural. Very few of these phrases are medical. They're not about clinical decisions that are being made. And what matters most to people, we've learned, it's similar to the birthing movement, where it was not necessarily the hospitals and the doctors saying, all right, ladies, into the bathtub, dads come on in with the camcorders. It's people saying this is a human experience, not just a medical experience. And the same thing is true with death and dying, that medicine and technology have gotten so advanced over the last few decades that we have some more decisions to make, but this is still a very human experience that applies to all of us. And many times our wishes are in that kind of human realm as well. And then we offer some scale questions for people to think about. It's hard to say, well, what do you want towards the end of your life? Or as you're thinking about living through the end of your life, many people don't know. They're not familiar with what they may want or what's available. And we know that we can't talk about every hypothetical thing that could happen, but we could think about where we fall on a spectrum. So an example of, are you concerned about receiving too much care or too little care? Again, no right or wrong answer, but different people fall on different ends of that. I have a friend whose parents are the exact opposite ends. Her dad is like, if I am blinking, I'm in there trying to come out. He wants to be cryogenically frozen because science and medicine may advance in time. And her mom is on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. I do not want you to take extreme measures in these certain situations. That's really helpful to talk about and to know who could honor what those wishes are. So we invite people to think about that. How much do you want people to do exactly what you've said, no matter what, or what makes them feel most comfortable? And then we invite people to think about who are you going to talk to? When are you going to do this? We know that it always seems too soon until it's too late. And so really making a plan of when this is going to happen can be very helpful. And I'm going to share with you some tips that people have had. That we've learned from others. For us, we think it's important to do this early and often. So we're really encouraging these conversations when somebody turns 18 or 21. This is part of regular adult life, especially if somebody is moving away from home. A parent may not be an automatic decision maker or have access to records. This is something we should be doing at that age. Doing it often, before a medical crisis. Maybe it's once a decade, or every April 16th, which is National Healthcare Decisions Day, due to a Benjamin Franklin quote that nothing is certain in life but death and taxes. So we do our taxes on the 15th, and on the 16th, you review your advanced care planning, and you think about, is everything still in line? Is the person I've chosen to speak for me still the person I want? Do they know what I would like? So just thinking about this with some pacing or regularity. There could be major life events. So I know I had this conversation with my husband when we got married. We revisited it again when we had a first child. Marriage, divorce can be a really important time to do this. If you've already done this planning and you maybe have an ex that you no longer want as your decision maker, that's important to know. A death in a family, a new diagnosis. In part of my family, we're dealing with an Alzheimer's diagnosis. That person is no longer the decision maker for her spouse. And so there's different points in time where we should be looking at this and addressing it regularly. Could be a major trip. My dad did a cross-country motorcycle trip as one of his midlife crises, and we had a conversation about what might you want. Motorcycle trip is a different kind of ballgame, if you will. And so let's talk about what you might want during that, if something happened. And then certainly when diagnosed with a new serious illness. But there's a lot of other times that have nothing to do with an illness that we think this is important. And then we offer icebreakers. How to even bring this up. And I think many of you have one of the best icebreakers here, that you attended this event, you heard about this initiative, you heard about this work that's going on around the country, and it made me realize we haven't talked about this. So I would love to understand what you want here. I was thinking about what happened with Aunt Susie, and it made me realize I haven't told you what I would want in that situation, or I don't know what you would want in that situation. So realizing this isn't always one big, huge sit-down conversation. People are going to approach this in different ways. But thinking about how it would be best received by the person that you want to engage. Is that in small snippets? Is it sending a message ahead of time or a phone call, or say, hey, Thanksgiving's coming up. We've got some family coming together. I'd love to be sure some point in that weekend we can talk about this. I remember a woman in Akron, Ohio at an event like this who said she hosted Thanksgiving every year. She made the desserts and she held them all hostage. And she said, no pumpkin pie till you tell me how you want to die, and made everybody in the room go around and talk about what they wanted. And that was appropriate in her family dynamic, and that might be entirely inappropriate in another family dynamic. And so I don't want to tell you exactly how you're going to broker this, but if you can be thinking about who do I want to engage, how are they most likely to receive this information well, can be helpful. And so I just wanted to share with you a couple of concepts that have come up that may help you if you're having these conversations. One is this idea of autonomy, and that is not universal. There are some people who really want you to follow exactly what they have told you, no matter what. We have a woman who wrote a book and a blog post to say, if I get dementia, here's a 20-point bullet list of exactly how I want to be cared for. Please do not stray from that. Really insistent based on her personal experience. And then on the flip side, I was at an event like this in Las Vegas, and the woman was going through it and thinking, and she said, I really don't have a strong opinion about my care. I just want my kids to do what makes them feel best when the time comes. But that's the conversation she needs to have with her kids. She just hadn't told them anything yet. So all they know is, Mom never told us, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. So for her, that's the conversation. For us, one of the things that I'm really drawn to this work for is not only the person whose end of life we might be discussing, but the ripple effect of the people around them who are going to grieve the loss of their person, but how complex or complicated that grief is. If siblings aren't talking to each other, if somebody's second guessing if I did the right thing, I don't know if this is what Mom would have wanted, that's one of the things that we're trying to help avoid. And really, again, thinking about where somebody might be most comfortable. I have a colleague whose mom kept avoiding this conversation, and she finally said, okay, I'll sit with you and do it, but I want to, I'm coming at Easter, we can sit and do it, but I need to do it out of the house. I want to sit on a park bench far away because I don't want to cry with the grandkids home. I don't want them to see me crying. And that's why she had been putting it off, is because anytime she was home, all the grandkids were around and that was too hard for her. But let's go somewhere where I feel more comfortable being with you. Thinking about the type of care somebody might want, I always encourage people when you're doing this to give current answers. With your current body, state of mind, health, what would you want right now if something unexpected happened? When I first went through the guide with my husband, when we got married, he answered every question as if he were 85 years old with Alzheimer's in a nursing home. And I said, we have time to get to that situation. But his father died unexpectedly at 41 playing basketball. And I need to understand what would you want if something unexpected happened? And then again, as maybe a new diagnosis comes into play, we can continue to update that. But really encouraging people not to think about all the hypotheticals that could occur. What would you want right now if you couldn't speak for yourself? The concept of home comes up a lot. We know for a lot of people there's a desire to die at home. And I was at an event where a woman came to me in tears just saying, my grandmother's only wish was to die at home and we couldn't do it. Her dementia got so difficult that we couldn't manage it at home. And I feel like I didn't honor the one thing she asked for. And I would urge people to kind of unpack what home means to somebody. It's not always medically feasible or financially feasible, or I remember somebody in a 5th floor walk up in Manhattan, it's not always physically possible. But I know, for example, for my grandmother, it was having her cat with her. She was willing to go anywhere as long as her cat would be with her. That was what home was. For others, it's, I want to have a private room or see family regularly or have home-cooked meals or be able to put my own art up on the walls. So understanding what is it about home that is most important to somebody. To often be careful if you ever hear somebody say, if I ever get like that, pull the plug or give me the whole enchilada. That's like the far ends of the spectrum that we were talking about, and asking somebody to expand on it a little bit more. I was at an event where a husband was sitting next to his wife and he's like, oh yeah, I've done this. Both of my parents had dementia and my family knows if I ever get like that, we're gonna have a big party on the beach and then I'm gonna swim to China and if I don't make it, oh well. And he was laughing, and he's like, see, we did it. We've done the whole thing. And his wife's eyes nearly rolled out of her head. And she said, all he ever talks about is this party at the beach, and he will not go any further than that. But I think he's trying to convey what it is that he's worried about, or these questions gave them something to really talk about and get a bit more tangible. And then really even thinking down to what's the one sentence that comes to mind for somebody? In Atul Gawande's book, Being Mortal, there's somebody who talks about her father preparing for surgery, and she asks him ahead of time, what makes life worth living? What should I know? What would you want for a little more time? And he says, as long as I can eat chocolate ice cream and watch football, I'm in, I'm good. And there was a complication during his procedure, and he was going to be paralyzed and have these complications. And the doctor said, what do you want us to do? And she said, well, can he eat chocolate ice cream and watch football? Get back in there, go do it. And he could, and he lived another 10 years very happy with what his abilities were. And I have a colleague who was talking with her husband, and she synthesized all of her wishes basically into one sentence, which is, if I can intellectually and emotionally parent our children, I'm in. Meaning, if based on the prognosis that the doctors thought that she would have, if she can understand what's going on, they got 2 teenagers, can I understand what's going on in their life? Can I help them with their social issues? Can I talk to them about their homework? I don't care about any physical limitations that I might have. I would want you to do as much as you can. But if I would not be able to be engaged in their life in that way, I don't need you to take extreme measures. Her husband is able to answer almost any question that a clinician would have based on that question of, can she emotionally or socially parent our children? So thinking about that type of a thing, of what makes it worth living, so that somebody could make decisions from that. And then thinking about the role that others will play, how to find a healthcare proxy who will honor your wishes. There was a woman in Honolulu who said she was trying to do this with her husband, and she told him her wishes, and he was like, nope, can't do it. I can't throw away a plant with a single green leaf left on it. I would sit by your side in a vegetative state for 20 years. Like, please don't make me make these decisions. She asked her oldest son, who said, oh, I got it, Ma. You don't want anything. I'm never going to let anybody hook you up to a machine no matter what. Like, good, I got it. She's like, I didn't say that one either. Her second child cried hysterically the entire time and couldn't get through the conversation. And then she went to her youngest daughter, who's now the fourth person she's got to, who really listened to what her mom said, understood that depending on her prognosis, she'd be willing to try some things. And so that's who she chose. And so I really want to reiterate today this idea of finding a healthcare proxy who will honor your wishes, and that does not always have to be a spouse or the oldest child. It can be a friend. It can be a neighbor. We're seeing congregations where solo agers may feel that they don't have somebody naturally, and congregations are pairing people together. So really thinking about who you might want and how to frame that. I know some people who say, oh, my spouse would be so upset if I didn't choose them as my proxy. But to frame it as like, I want you to be by my side, not having to make these hard decisions. You're going to be there with me for comfort and for other roles that are really important. So thinking about who can honor wishes. I was mentioning solo agers earlier. I do think that for solo agers who may feel that they do not have a natural person to go to, it's all the more important reason to have the legal documentation, the medical documentation, making sure that you talk to your clinicians so that they understand what you want, but also looking into these amazing community resources that are in town, the local area agency on aging, different groups that may have some additional suggestion for you. How important it is to tell more than one person what you've decided and who you've decided. There was a woman in Florida who said, my husband and I have done this. I'm his healthcare proxy. We've had these conversations. I feel good. But I'm his second wife, and he's got 2 adult children, and I realize they don't know. And that would start World War III if I'm suddenly making decisions, and all he has to do is give them the heads up. Barbara and I have been working on this. Just want you to know she's the healthcare decision maker. The same thing I was sharing with my mom, one of 7. It was clear that she was the one who was going to get really in the weeds. The others were aware that it was her, but just being sure that more than one person knows. Sometimes that could be sending an email or writing a letter or kind of saying, hey, everyone, wanted you to know, here's who I've chosen. There was a woman who said, my husband's kind of like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. Like, he's real mopey about this topic. He is not going to sit through a conversation. But she phrased things as yes/no questions for him. I've been thinking about this. It's really important to me that we do it. Is it right to assume that if something happened, you would want me to be the decision maker? Yes. Okay. I've thought about what I think you would want in these situations. Does this sound right? He's like, yeah, but here's one thing I would change. That was a much easier approach. And again, thinking about how your person is going to receive this can be really important. How important it is to avoid family or caregiver bullying. I'm putting bullying in quotation marks, but I was at an event in Orlando with maybe 250 people in a room, and a woman got up in tears and just said, I realize I owe my father a tremendous apology as I'm sitting here, because he's really sick right now. And she listed all of his health issues, and his breathing got a lot worse last night, and he wouldn't go to the hospital. And my siblings and I have been laying it on so thick. We have been calling, we've been texting, we've been sending him videos of grandkids saying, we need our grandfather. And I realize now he's trying to tell us something, and nobody has been listening. And so I've now sent a group family message. We're going to have another meeting tonight. Like, we really need to hear what he is trying to tell us about what he wants. And that idea of also trying to think of who else could be helpful in these conversations. I was out in California last month, and a gentleman said that his mom really would not hear from him about this conversation, but he asked his aunt to help. her sister was able to talk to her a little bit better. And so thinking about who are the other people in your life that might be a helpful messenger if you're not the person who's going to be best received for it, how you can help orchestrate that. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about hope and miracles. And I just loved this quote so much, that early on we hope for a cure. And when that is impossible, we hope for as much good time as possible. And then at a later point, we hope for relief from suffering. And then in everyone's life, we reach a time when we are hoping for a death with dignity. Which I thought was a really helpful way of thinking about hope and how we maintain hope for somebody, and saw some really helpful language around this idea for somebody who is praying for a miracle, or I want everything, give me everything that I can have. Some language of, part of doing everything for you is knowing what you'd want if there's a time where you can't communicate with me. Would you be willing to talk about that? What are you fighting for? What does doing everything mean? What does a miracle look like to you? Trying to understand, I'm with you in that hope, and I want to be sure that I can honor what you would want if you couldn't speak. And giving people a chance, especially, we talk a lot, you hear a lot about the language, like battle language used in cancer, or fighting, and, he's a fighter, she's a fighter. Trying to help understand and give opportunities for somebody to update their framing. That's the one thing that we know, that we are all mortal. And maybe it's after a surgery or after a certain period of time, can you tell me what this experience has been like for you? What was surgery like for you? Giving people a chance to update what their wishes are. And I think this shift in framing, as opposed to giving up, to letting go, which I think can be very helpful, especially when engaging people. This has been helpful with adult children. Your father is a strong man. His body is struggling. Putting the onus on the body is what is having a hard time. It's not that your father's not a fighter and isn't trying to give it everything he can, but his body is struggling or his body is failing, can be really helpful. And I just love this quote, that our ultimate goal, after all, is not a good death, but a good life to the very end. That's so much for us, that this is how do you want to live your life through the end. The dying part is the very last piece, but we are still living. There are things that still bring us joy, and that's what we particularly want to focus on. For those of you who might be here in a more professional capacity, as well as those of you who are here as the kind of family caregiver, I'll make sure that these slides are available for people afterwards, but there's just some really helpful language that we've learned for talking about what this advanced care planning can be, or what palliative care is, what hospice care is. For advanced care planning, this idea that you can have a say in your care, and treatments only work if they work for you. That language, this has all been tested with lots of focus groups, all different demographics. These are phrases that really work well for people. The more you speak up, the better your healthcare can be. Tell your doctors what matters most to you so you can get the care that's right for you. I think many times, I know my grandmother would get dressed up for her doctor's appointments and be like, oh, everything's fine. I don't want to bother you. You're very busy, doctor. And to help people realize that for clinicians, it's helpful to understand what matters most to somebody. They can make better recommendations. If I know that what you want is to be at that graduation in 2 months, then we can have a plan and we can work towards that. And we'll figure this out together. Let's make a plan for your care. The concept of we'll figure this out together works across everyone. And helping people realize their wishes can change. I remember a gentleman in Boston who had been very clear with his doctors that he did not want extreme measures taken. And yet he was admitted to the ICU. He had a full code status. His doctor was rounding and was like, Mr. Brown, tell me what's going on. I thought we had a plan, but I want to understand what's going on for you. And he said, we did. But my first great-grandchild is due in 2 weeks. And I will do everything I can to be here to meet that baby. And then we can go back to the other plan. And I think that's an important thing here for people to realize this can be fluid, and what matters to somebody may change. And we should be able to respond to that and not be like my mother-in-law who said, well, 13 years ago, I filled out some piece of paper before a shoulder surgery. This is an ongoing conversation that we can be having. And I feel like the news, current events, it's always helpful. My mom will every now and then be like, oh, I saw a movie. I did like this. I don't like that. Or here we're talking about President Jimmy Carter, who's been in hospice for 18 months. Let's talk about some of the things that we're seeing that are happening around us. Same thing around palliative care as an extra layer of support. You can live well while living with a particular illness. It helps your doctors talk to each other. It's kind of a team for all your concerns. And then in hospice, this idea of kind of enjoying more moments of life. You're not alone in this. We've got a group that's here to help you. So some of the messaging that's been really helpful for us in doing this work more broadly, we're trying to reach millions of people, not only in the US, but internationally now. There's a lot of countries that are taking this on. To just normalize that these are conversations we can do ourselves and to help people have those conversations. So we really try to talk up the benefits. It's not leading with death and dying, but it's showing how this can be helpful to people. I've tried to share kind of some examples for you. Presenting choices, that at every stage of illness, we have choices. There may not always be curative treatments, but there are a lot of comfort treatments that are available. I never want to hear, sorry, there's nothing more we can do for you, Mrs. Jones. There's always something more we can be doing and paying attention to what would help somebody be comfortable. To use stories, the positive stories or aspirational stories or funny stories tend to work much better at getting somebody involved in this than scare tactics of look at these bad things that can happen if you don't have the conversation. So we really try to focus on positive, encouraging dialogue more than once, and kind of invoking this new team, that it's not just a patient and their doctor, but it's the people around them, their caregivers, their community. That's an important part of this as well. And then for anybody who's working on creating materials, that imagery matters, that people, if they're looking at a brochure, and I'm going to admit, we used to have two people holding hands, just a picture of two hands being held, or people walking on a sunset in the back. That doesn't tend to work. If you think about pharmaceutical commercials that we see on TV for some drug, like people riding a bike and having a great time and enjoying their life and living their life, that's what somebody wants to say, like, ooh, those people look like they're that doesn't look hard. I want to be able to do that. And so paying attention to the imagery that we're using for our materials is really helpful as well. And this idea that conversations clarify is one of the biggest things I wanted to hit home. We know there's some people who don't do this because they say, oh, my family knows what I want. I don't need to upset them with this conversation. But conversations really clarify. That we got an email from a woman who was talking about her grandparents who she was going to visit, and she'd been having a really hard time talking to them about their wishes, and their memory was getting worse. And she said that on the flight, she kind of looked through our materials, and I started asking questions instead of telling them how worried I was, which is really important framing. Asking questions, understanding what mattered to them, helped them be able to have the conversation. She became their decision maker. They had agreed to move. A lot of things got into motion at that point. And I loved this quote from a health system that we've worked with, that the new hope is we can change the culture to treat the patients as they wish to be treated rather than treating them because we can. Which I think is a really important thing, especially as science has gotten more and more advanced, of let's be sure we're doing this because they want it. So my hope for you all today would be that you take a look at the conversation starter guides, think about who you might want as your healthcare proxy, start having conversations, bring this concept of what matters most to you back to whatever your sphere of influence is. Might be a family unit. For some of you in the back, it could be employers. We are often the influencers in our life that help people have these conversations, help normalize it for friends. And you can even send a message today. I'm at this session and I want to talk to you about something that we learned. And I'm going to do my best to read for you this font from a woman who was at an event like this, was a physician who was at one of our early events, and you can see her handwriting. She took out a piece of lined paper and she wrote a letter to her daughters. And here I've been talking about conversations as if they're all verbal. For some people, it's much easier to put something in writing or to send a message as an email to say, I want you to reference this when you need to. But she wrote, if you're faced with a decision you're not ready for, it's okay. I'll try to let you know what I would want for various circumstances. But if you come to something we haven't anticipated, it's okay. And if you come to a decision point and what you decide results in my death, it's okay. You don't need to worry that you've caused my death. You haven't. I will die because of my illness or my body failing or whatever. You don't need to feel responsible. Forgiveness is not required, but if you feel bad, responsible, guilty, first of all, don't. And second of all, you are loved and forgiven. If you're faced with a snap decision, don't panic. Choose comfort, choose home, choose less intervention, choose to be together at my side, holding my hand, singing, laughing, loving, celebrating, and carrying on. I will keep loving you and watching you and being proud of you. It's a beautiful item for her kids to have in her handwriting. She's then gone on to record it in her voice, saying, this is not your fault. This is my body. You are not responsible. You are forgiven. Don't panic and be together. And I think that's a really wonderful thing to be able to give to her children. So if you are interested or on social media, would love for you to stay connected with us. If you're interested in bringing this to your community, we have, in addition to the free resources for helping people have conversations, we have all sorts of free resources for community groups who want to bring this out to their region. We know we're a small team. We can't be everywhere at once, and we're not always the best messenger for somebody, so we have a lot to help you do that. And I've also put my email address up here, DeBartolo@ihi.org, and I can leave that up and we can try to expand it maybe along with our website just so people can stay in touch. And I'm happy to see if there's time for questions. I know we're almost right at the hour, but I'm just so grateful to be here with you today. I'll stick around for a while, looking forward to the later sessions as well. So thank you so much.